Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good morning for me. Thank you for joining this morning and this afternoon. I have a lot to say, and I'm hoping that there's room for a conversation, so I better get started. Today, I'm going to speak about the why of doing this work, the depths of the inspiration that we can find in the well. And tomorrow, I will go into details of the what. What can we do, or what do I do in this realm of equity and inclusion, the specifics. I want to be clear that I am going to offer you my thinking, my thoughts, my ideas. And let's really think about this. There is no one and only way of thinking. My passion, though, might shine through my ideas. So I want to offer a caution. Take my ideas home, sleep with them, digest them, and see if any of my ideas become your ideas or not. To me, the most important thing is that we think about what we're doing. And in that thinking about what we're doing, that we really develop reasons for anything that we choose to do. I don't think there are any ideas or practices or customs that are above our honest consideration. There are no sacred cows, if you will. Everything needs our own consideration to determine if it resonates in our heart thinking as something that we can live with, as something that we want to practice or think. My biggest wish, my wish for this conference, my wish for all of us always, is that we have reasons for what we do in our early childhood programs. And it might be that we disagree with each other, but the important thing is that we have reasons. We can respect each other when we have reasons for what we're doing. The questions we're facing related to this conference are how to engage in anti-bias work, and what can we do about overcoming racism and genderism and religionism in our movement. So to begin, I want to offer a acknowledgement of the land where I am sitting right now in California. I'm in Santa Cruz, California. So where my school is and where I live is on the unceded territory of the Awaswas-speaking Upi tribe. Now, in our time, the Amamutsan tribal band, who's comprised of descendants of these indigenous peoples who were taken to missions in Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during the Spanish colonization of the central coast of California. The Amamutsan tribal band is working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and to heal themselves and the land from historical trauma. So I want to begin today by recognizing that every member of my Santa Cruz community, the school, and people who live in the wider area here continue to benefit from the use and the occupation of the land. Through this land acknowledgement, I want to affirm the sovereignty of these indigenous peoples, and I work to hold my community more accountable to the needs of indigenous peoples. I say that because we all, in North America certainly, are living in the aftermath of imperialism, colonialism, and much of that lives on, and we see it in systemic racism, and all of this needs to be acknowledged. Before we can begin to do our work, we have to acknowledge that there are wide-ranging practices that are based on undervaluing and dehumanizing vast portions of humanity. These practices live strongly today, and they also live in our educational movement, our beloved Steiner Waldorf education. I also want to begin by acknowledging those who worked to create early childhood programs based on Steiner's wisdom, those who have forged pathways towards seeking the deep wisdom that supports what we are doing now. I want to honor and offer gratitude to those who have passed away, who have made this mystery school of Steiner education their life work. They freely offered their own will to the divine creator beings, and their spirits still remain active in our lives and in our movement. And particularly, I'm getting choked up, particularly I want to honor my friend and colleague, Margaret Meyercourt, who touched many of our lives. And she inspired us to work out of the deepest connections to spirit. Margaret passed away a little more than 1 year ago, March 2020. So maybe we could just take one quiet moment just to honor Margaret and all those others who have led the way for us. Thank you for bearing with me. Steiner education is not a fixed thing. Steiner education is an evolving activity, a spiritual activity, and it involves being willing to accept the will of spiritual beings, the will of the beings of love and light. If we remember from lecture 4 of the study of man, or the more modern title, Foundations of Human Experience, lecture 4 describes the various levels of will and how we can develop capacities for free action. And the highest level, when we achieve this highest level of will, what we do is we give our will away to the spiritual beings. Not my will, but thine will. So the greatest gift that we have, the possible gift of freely choosing how we respond in situations, we give it to the spiritual beings so that we can do the work that they are asking of us. I want to mention this because these are the first allies that we need to recognize in the work of moving towards the future. The spiritual beings are working with us if we are willing to be open to what they are asking of us. Our work as educators working in a mystery school, a spiritual-based educational system, which is based on our own self-spiritual development, our work is to support the young child to accomplish what the world and what the spiritual beings are asking of them, and to be able to support the child in revealing and offering their unique gifts to the world. Each of us has the task of getting out of the way of those young human beings. We have to support them without being an obstacle to the expression of their full potential. This is the calling to which we responded to. This is the task of Steiner education. How do we stay true to this calling? How do we unite ourselves with the children who are coming toward us and to what the world needs? At the same time, finding our own destiny in doing this. And that's why this is a mystery school. That's why this is not just a pedagogical technique or educational system, but this is a school wherein the educators are engaged in active spiritual development. Steiner often spoke about the being of the sun, as high spiritual being who wants to help humanity evolve, a high spiritual being who united itself with the earth and with the earth's destiny. The compass that tells us if we are guided by this being of the sun, by that guiding spiritual impulse, is whether or not people are coming together, whether or not people are being brought together and united. We are guided by this being of the sun if the activities in which we engage bring people together. Conversely, we can know if there's division, if people aren't feeling part of what we're doing, then we can see that we are not aligned with that guiding spiritual being. There's another high spiritual being the herald, you could say, of this sun being, who is the spirit of our time, who is also interested in our activities towards creating a new cosmopolitan community of diverse peoples, actively engaged in equality activities, in equity, in diversity, in justice. This is the spirit of our time, who is wanting to work with us. And this is the task of our time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones that spiritual beings have been waiting for, to truly take up this work of creating a humane human world of acceptance and dignity, of equity and equality for all peoples and all people. There's one tool that I want to offer so that we can learn to read the wisdom of the cosmos and transform it into deeds of love. This tool Steiner called the main exercise. Some of you have probably heard about it, and it's an imaginative exercise wherein we can experience ultimate reality. We can experience an opening of ourselves to receiving the guiding impulse of the cosmic wisdom towards aiding us in manifesting the future through our own deeds of love. You could say this is a breathing exercise. We are breathing in the light of the cosmos, which is another name for the wisdom of the cosmos, and we're breathing out deeds of love. We transform this light-filled wisdom, or this wisdom-filled light. We take it in, we transform it in our hearts, and we pour out into the world deeds based on love. The words of this exercise, but the words are, "In purest outpoured light shimmers the Godhead of the universe. In purest outpoured love shines the Godhood of my soul." This is the first part of the exercise. The second part of the exercise is you could say, is a way to tune up your own etheric body, to really get the kinks out, to smooth the flowing of your own etheric forces. But this part is an exercise in experiencing that point and periphery are the same. It's a very important capacity that we can experience, that we are here and we are also in the farthest most periphery of the cosmos. At the same time, it's an exercise in taking in the wisdom and realizing the transformative possibility of a human being, which is to turn wisdom into action, wisdom into deeds based on love. For me, this is an important meditation, and Steiner called it the main exercise. So if we have any trust in Steiner's thoughts about spiritual development, we should take note that he called it the main exercise. As you can see, I am a white person. It is by an accident of my birth that I'm white. Probably in other lifetimes, I was other physical attributes making up who I think of myself as in that lifetime. But simply in this lifetime, simply as a result of that accident, I live a life of privilege. If I live in North America, at least, or England or Europe. And I feel it's my responsibility to do what I can do to break down the systems that have created an uneven playing field, the systems that have given me this privilege. I am actively working to dismantle various isms, including colonialism, racism, imperialism, genderism, what I call religionism, whether they're conscious or not, in me and in the communities that I engage with, because I want to develop a new, vibrant, and living culture of Waldorf education where everyone feels valued, where everyone feels welcomed, and everyone has equal opportunity for their gifts to enrich their school community, whatever their race, religion, homeland, gender identity, mother tongue, economic status, ability, whatever their situation is, however they self-identify. I want them to feel part of the community, and I want them to feel able to participate and to offer their gifts to make the community more beautiful, ever more beautiful. I also want you to know that I am an ally to those who are working to help Waldorf education evolve and thrive into the future. So Waldorf education, Steiner education, can fulfill its high possibility, its destiny. I mentioned already how we can become an ally to the spiritual beings who are trying to create the future. And the spiritual beings are trying to become allies with the human beings who are trying to create this same future. So we have to think about how we can align ourselves with spiritual beings, but also with each other as human beings. So where you are locally, I know it's important that you find colleagues who can work with you, who you have some resonance with, so that you can work towards creating an ever more wonderful and welcoming and inclusive education. And we can reach out across national and regional boundaries to find each other. So we are all allies for each other in this work, if we choose to be. I think of it like this. The spiritual beings are there, and they're whispering to us all the time. And they're telling us that if we are willing to participate in creating this future of equity and diversity and inclusiveness, then these spiritual beings will be with us. This is, I think, part of what the main exercise is saying, that if we listen to what the spiritual beings are telling us, then we will be receiving the aid they are giving us towards creating this love-filled, light-filled education for the future. Now, I'd like to get into some nitty-gritty of intellectual activities so that we can kind of have some common vocabulary. And I should apologize. I haven't been able to attend much of this conference because I saw the end of Serene's talk, but we're in vastly different time zones. It's 8 in the morning where I am. So if some of this has been covered already, I apologize. But I'd like to offer you some definitions. And the first definition I want to share is something that we could call white supremacy culture. Now, I'm not talking about neo-Nazis. I'm talking about this array of institutional and societal and individual practices that have been developed and evolved based on the idea that white people and the ideas, thoughts, and beliefs and actions of white people are central, are superior to other peoples, to people of color and their ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions. So for many people, for many white people, it's hard to see and harder even to accept that they've benefited from white supremacy culture and that they live in white supremacy culture. And so that's a definition. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. I also want to define something I think of as anti-racism. Now, anti-racism is something that it's when one is taking an active stand against racism, not just that one isn't racist. That's not anti-racist. There's not an in-between safe space between racist and anti-racist of not racist. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you're not actively doing something to change the way things are, then you are supporting the way things are. So you're either anti-racist or racist. I suggest for really a deep dive into this idea that you read the book by Ibram X. Kendi on becoming an anti-racist. It's a really important book. Another concept I'd like to mention is implicit bias. Implicit bias is when we unknowingly hold an ideology, or we are unconscious about the attitudes that we hold about a group of people, for instance. So anytime a thought arises in you that judges some individual based on generalizing that individual into the group that you see them as part of, that's bias. So if you, well, I think you know what I mean. Explicit bias, on the other hand, means we knowingly are acting out of these harmful ideologies or attitudes. So, as I mentioned earlier, neo-Nazi person might be, I would suggest, someone who is acting out of explicit bias. Implicit bias is when you judge somebody as part of a certain group, and you think, oh, those people are such and such, or those people aren't such and such. That's implicit bias. I also want to mention the difference between celebrating and othering. When we celebrate a culture that is other than our own, a culture that we are not seeing ourselves as part of, we can be honoring the differences. We are honoring how we are different from the culture that we are celebrating. When we other someone, we make it be that we are the us and they are the them. And we do it by attributing negative characteristics to behaviors or to other attributes. Okay, so that's some definitions. And I'm going to use some of these definitions. And for a moment, right here and now, I would like to consider Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner gave many, many gifts to the world. And we have to acknowledge that he was immersed in white supremacy culture. And we have to acknowledge that he had implicit bias. No one knows what he would do if he were alive today. It would only be guessing. But we can look in the lectures, particularly lectures that Steiner gave, and we can find things he said that attributed various qualities and characteristics to people, not as individuals, but as groups. He verbalized stereotypes and biases, and those were diligently taken down by the note takers at these lectures. So there's a lot of things you could say that are questionable, and some things you could find that you maybe would want to say are racist or very, the implicit bias is showing. And we have to acknowledge that. I think the first step towards the future is that we have to acknowledge that and distance ourselves from those ideas and from those embedded biases. Standing right beside that, I also recognize what I think of as Steiner's intention, and the intention behind Waldorf education, Steiner education, which is that we create a universal welcome for all peoples so that we can educate children towards a much needed renewal of culture, to educate children without preconceived notions of what someone is or should become, to create an education in which people learn how to live together again. Steiner said that as the most important thing that we could do. So, okay, he had lofty ideas and ideals. And if we are always going to defend and apologize for the things that Steiner said, we are going to be blocking forward progress, and we're going to be preventing people from participating in what we're doing because they see the hypocrisy in it. Our task now, our true task today and always, is to go beyond our knowing, to go behind the words into the intentions and the forward progress, to go beyond our inheritance of tradition and our inheritance of knowledge of the things that we're supposed to do. Can we say with integrity, I've arrived at this place, here and now, where the work has just begun? In a way, we should always be saying that. I have arrived here, and now the work has begun. Let's move forward. Can we live in that space of the work has just begun with trust in the spiritual beings, trust in our allies, trust in our own creativity and goodwill? This is really our task. This is the task of a mystery school. We cannot let our minds prevent our hearts from loving the future that is coming towards us. The future has to be filled with justice. Justice lives in our hearts, and justice is oriented towards love. So how do we stay in connection with the guiding beings in this realm of light, in service to the spiritual world? This is the one realm of allyship that is working with us to birth the future. This realm, it's not the only realm. There are human beings involved here. But can we live into this gesture, not even a gesture? Can we live into the reality of not my will, but the will of you, creator spiritual beings? So this is where we begin to hearken again back to the main exercise. The main exercise is this epic breathing in. So maybe I'll just walk you through it a little bit as a way that I think of using this exercise. You know, you've probably heard about this idea that there's this yoga of light, or this breathing of light that Steiner suggested, or Steiner offered as a path, a practice. So if you could imagine wherever you are sitting or standing right now, and if you were to close your eyes and imagine the room that you're sitting in or standing in a way you're already a little bit outside your body by having that. You could say it's an imagination, but you could also say that you're really disembodying yourself a little bit by experiencing in your inner life the space that surrounds you. And if you could expand that space bigger to include the whole building in which you are, you could include the town where you are, the island that you live on, the hemisphere that you live in, and you keep expanding this awareness, your awareness, expand it until you're out amongst the stars and planets, and still expanding it as far as you can go until you're at the farthest most reaches of the cosmos, however you picture that. And just try to feel it's not just a one-dimensional experience. It's not a two-dimensional experience, really, but it's a three-dimensional experience. You are, you've created a sphere, a gigantic sphere, and the outside of the sphere is where all the farthest most stars and planets are located. And from that place, from there, from the farthest most stars and planets, you begin to participate in the light that's coming towards the earth, the purest outpoured light that is coming towards the earth. And you sort of ride on the waves of that light. As it gets, you could think of it now as a sphere that's shrinking. The sphere is shrinking smaller and smaller and smaller. In purest outpoured light shimmers the Godhead of the universe that is shrinking, shrinking, shrinking as it comes towards you. Until when it gets to you, it is a tiny pinpoint, and it is located in your heart. This infinite light-filled wisdom coming from the Godhead, coming from the periphery of the universe, comes towards us, and it condenses into a pinpoint. And once you receive it in your heart, you take that condensed wisdom, you receive it, you digest it, and you turn it around, and you send it back into the world around you, now as deeds of love. You send it out now, so the pinpoint in your heart begins to expand. The pinpoint, which is, you could say, the pinpoint is an infinitely small sphere. The pinpoint begins to grow, and it grows larger and larger until, again, it has grown to the infinite reaches of the universe. And the exercise is to breathe the light of the cosmos in, and the love that is representing the godhood of your own soul, sending it out into the universe, breathing in the light, the wisdom of the creator beings, of the Godhead of the universe, breathing out through deeds of love. Breathe in, digest it, turn it around into deeds. Take in the light, send out love. Take in the wisdom, send out love. That's the first part of the exercise. And in that, you could say, the shrinking of that sphere, the shrinking from the infinite reaches of the cosmos towards us, we pass through the realms of all sorts of spiritual beings, of the beings that are helping us, of our beloved human beings who have passed away. They live in that realm between the infinite reaches of the cosmos and where we are right now. So in the breathing in that light, we are breathing in the wisdom of our ancestors. We're breathing in the wisdom of our beloved people who have passed on. We're breathing in the guidance of those who have gone before us. And we take it all in if we're open to it, if we can really listen, be open with all of our senses, especially our heart as a sense organ, then we can turn that wisdom into deeds of love, to change the world, to change our Steiner education world to start with. The second part of the exercise, you can find it. I see somebody posted a link to it. You can find the the book Guidance in Esoteric Training is one place that you can find it. I advise, though, I suggest that as Steiner offered this originally, he was speaking about actual breath. And as his own work evolved, as our own work can evolve, he transformed this exercise, this idea, from the breathing of breath to the breathing of light. So in Guidance in Esoteric Training, he's quoted as speaking about light. He's talking about actual breathing. And I suggest that you consider breathing as a imagination exercise, a breathing in of light, and that you, with your imagination, you follow the light as it travels from the infinite reaches of the cosmos to you, to the center of you. And then you follow the love that you send back out into the cosmos all the way. And after you've done this in and out breathing a few times, Steiner said that we could begin to listen to what the cosmos is speaking, and that the first thing we can hear is the cosmos saying, I am, and that we hear it, you could say, or that we experience it in this part of our body, in what people call the third eye, right in front of the pineal gland. We receive these words or this concept, I am. We breathe it in through this part of our body and we breathe it out. And then we give some space to digest that experience. And then we breathe in the words, it thinks. And we breathe that in through our larynx. We breathe it in, excuse me, and breathe it out. It thinks. And then we breathe in the words she feels, which is in our heart, really in our heart. She feels. And finally, we breathe in the words he wills. And that we breathe in through our skin as a sensing organ, through our entire body. We breathe in the words he wills, we breathe it in through our pores, and we breathe it back out. We breathe it in through our pores and back out. And then the final part of this exercise is to picture ourselves as our ideal version of our own self. So in a way, it's a simple exercise, and in every other way, it's a very profound and deep, or deep activity. And the point is, it's an activity that we participate. We join into this moving imagination, and that is one way that we can receive this wisdom, and that we can know what to do next. I also want to say, there's so many things to say and so little time. Steiner's ideas on cultural renewal are a foundation. They're the guiding principle of this work. We also have to recognize that it's not going to happen unless all the individual teachers who are the practitioners of Waldorf education, the teachers, the individual humans, have to do the work. Because like you, I have biases, unconscious bias, implicit bias. Our predecessors who practiced Waldorf education, who forged the way, had implicit bias. And a lot of what they did became tradition. It became dogma. There is a strong element of white supremacy culture in English-speaking Steiner education, in Waldorf education. And over the many years, a lot of unacknowledged, unconscious biases have crept into the fabric and the traditions and the practices of our early childhood education. I am super grateful for the gifts of my predecessors. I respect the elders. And I also acknowledge that their embedded bias thinking has lived on. It lives on as unexamined dogma, and that we each have this. And so the work depends on each of us being willing to discover open-mindedness about our own thoughts. Is it possible that things that I think are the opposite of what's true? I mean, that to me, that's what open-mindedness means. Can we really live into that gesture of letting go of our attachment to our own thinking? Otherwise, we can't examine our own practices. We have to be able to let go of our old practices, our old habits, and our habits in thinking especially. And this is where we have to develop open-mindedness. Lack of open-mindedness, attachment to our habits, attachment to our thinking, these are the obstacles that get in the way of forward progress. These are the obstacles to positive development. So we have to have a willingness to do better. We have to have a willingness to take a hard and honest assessment of what we're doing. And honestly, it takes a lot of courage, because we might discover that we're not happy with the way we've been doing things because we didn't really think about the way that we were doing things. So it's really hinging on us taking an active role in all that we do, an active thinking role, not just because they taught us in teacher training, not just because the other teachers at the school do such and such, or that your favorite mentor teacher said such and such, but that you really have to go into whatever the it is and determine which practices are you going to do in this realm. And, I mentioned at the beginning that it's easy to think there's the one and only way to do things. And it's easy for me, Steve, to come off as I know the one and only ways to do things. But I suggest that we all find the ways to let go of our own attachments to the ways of doing things and see where we have unconsciousness in these activities, where we have implicit bias. I mentioned this high being of the sun, the high being of the sun, who is uniting every human being into a community, or who wants to unite every human being into a community of love. This high being of the sun that liberates human beings from the separateness of self, the separateness of own ideas, that liberates us from self-interest into community, into unity. Can we live with love for this future that's not yet born? Can we develop in ourselves, or can we just find in ourselves the love for the human beings, the young human beings who are coming towards us, the little children? And some of them aren't born yet. What are we doing to prepare for those children who are coming towards us, and that we have right now? And if we think about our work in this way, if we become aware of this coming future, then we see where the obligation is to serving this future. We can find the will for taking up this sacred work, because that's what it really is. This is sacred work of welcoming spiritual beings who are just beginning their path as a physical being. Waldorf education, or I guess as you guys call it, Steiner education, was born out of this sacred knowledge. how do we connect with the forces of love that are needed to do what is needed? How do we connect with the forces of love that are asking us to birth the future? Our work is to make sure everyone has an equal chance of becoming fully human. This is the responsibility to serving love. This is the responsibility to justice. Change is knocking on our door, and it's kind of overdue. Opening the door to the future is what we're being called to do. You know, and it's easy to get overwhelmed in this too. Don't try and do everything, and don't try to do everything right now. But the point is to do something. We have to do something. Now, I think there are a lot of areas that deserve attention for early childhood professionals. And tomorrow I'm going to get into a lot of details, things like storytelling and many things. But the place where we have to start is our inner work. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today. We have to look at the why we have to do this work. And part of it is that we have to discover our own bias, and we have to learn or we have to develop practices that can help us overcome our own bias, discover it and overcome it. Also, we have to recognize that this white supremacy culture that Waldorf education grows out of, has hurt people, has wounded people. We have to acknowledge these wounds. We can't deny, we can't excuse, we can't rationalize. We have to say, yes, that some of the practices, some of the things people have said or done, that schools have done, have been hurtful, harmful to the human beings who ideally are being supported towards becoming whoever they are. But we have to acknowledge that there are wounds, and we have to connect with the will to heal. We have to be able to gather the knowledge that we need so that we can bring justice, so that we can transform what we have been doing into what we will do. One thing that we can do is we can look at history. We can begin to take a broader and deeper look at history and try to be open to consider the stories, which is what history is. Depends who's telling the story. What if we could consider the stories from the perspective of those peoples who were oppressed? It's often true that a counter story, a story other than what we were taught as children in school or from family and from our own experiences growing up, these counter stories can help to jar us out of the biases that we live with. We also can consider maybe you've heard of the word epigenetics. Epigenetics is a field of study that describes how trauma can be passed on from generation to generation, even without the following generations having directly experienced the trauma, but it's still embedded in the psyches of the oppressed peoples. An experiment was done with mice where they I think it was the first generation mouse was allowed to sniff the beautiful smell of roses and then given a negative experience, like a shock. And this mouse was pregnant, and the baby mouse, who didn't have that direct experience of the shock at smelling the rose, avoided roses. And this avoidance of roses went on for at least 7 generations of mice, even though only the first generation had that direct experience of the negative stimulus from sniffing the rose. It's the same with people. The trauma that somebody's ancestors experienced still lives in us, still lives today, unless it has been very actively addressed. It lives in the psyches as unredeemed trauma. So we have to recognize that, especially those of us who are white, those of us who live in places that practiced imperialism and colonialism and other oppressive activities. We also, I guess I'm saying, a lot of what I'm saying is to white people. You have to consider the privilege you have as a white person. And it's, in North America, I can speak for my experience and my friends' experiences. I don't get followed around when I go into a store. And my African-American friends get followed around when they go into a store, even if they are dressed nicely, and I might be dressed in a t-shirt with holes in it and, sandals or something. I hadn't shaved for a few days. I'm not going to get followed around. And that's just one simple little thing. There is privilege that white people have, and we have to acknowledge that. We also have to begin to know ourselves so that we can invite others into conversations about race, about anti-bias, about anti-racism as a path. We have to try to see our own bias and try to work on it really before we can invite others into conversation about this subject. As I said, it all hinges on open-mindedness. And can we be open-minded to really hear what others have to say? Can we really live into the possibility that what someone wants to say about us is the truth, even though it wasn't our intention, even though all of our explanation? What if what they're saying has some truth in it? And that's a really important place to be able to go. I'd like to offer a suggestion. I know we're running out of time. 55 minutes runs by really fast. I want to offer a book. Is this visible well? I hope. It's called Mindful of Race by Ruth King. It's subtitled Transforming Racism from the Inside Out, because she is really about doing the inner work towards seeing through these issues, seeing through to the future that is trying to be born. She's not an anthroposophist. Oh no. She comes from the world of mindfulness. It's a really important book. And the last thing I want to say is one intention, maybe a core intention of Steiner education, is to make it possible for a child